So hi everyone, thanks for coming. Thanks. So I mentioned that we brought in a whole new team to build Bushel. If the Bushel guys in the room could stand up, wave. So if you have any questions, thanks. Most everyone else is back in the office writing code, you slackers. Anytime you have a new thing, it's a new product, it's not going to be one person typically, especially in a company like this. So when we sat down to do this presentation, we really wanted to make it more of a team effort as far as presentations go. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a couple of the other people on the team do most of the presentation, or at least most of the slides, and then we'll have tons of time for Q&A, because I'm going to guess that given the smiling faces in the room, that there's going to be lots and lots of Q&A, especially that guy and that guy and that guy. But so to kick it off, Michael Bingham, he is our marketing extraordinaire for the team, and so I'll let him run through the first few slides. So, Mr. Bingham.
Hello, I'm Michael Bingham. I'm sure you all are comfortable. Thanks a lot for coming. We really do appreciate it. If you guys could just do me one huge favor. I'm a little awkward when I present, and you'll notice that my hands are stuffed in my pocket. Don't tell my mother, please. Okay? Because she will totally yell at me. So, we're here to tell you a little bit about Bushel. Our tag is managing devices for the Fortune 5 million. So, today, what we're going to do is tell you a little bit about why we created Bushel, do a little demo of Bushel, as well as talk about what's coming up next, and then leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So, enterprise tools. Everybody in here knows about enterprise tools. They're really about lots and lots of features, features that are useful, important, help the users out. It's about really growing a feature set with enterprise tools based on need. Everybody in this room is familiar with certifications, keeps up with them. But new features are really good if aimed at the right audience. But what about small business? Bushel is about actually addressing some of the audience that Casper doesn't address. Small businesses, small groups within businesses. There's a challenge when adopting something like Casper for those small businesses. Basically, enterprise tools are like an awesome playground, but all playgrounds need a monitor. You guys, for the most part, are the monitors. Small businesses don't have that ability, or don't have that time, don't have that resource. So, Bushel is about something that either helps those small businesses to be able to play safely in a playground, something that's simple, hopefully something that's easy to use, something that's intuitive, that allows that user, that business owner, that marketing director, that group director, to actually get back to their primary job. So, Shadow IT, those are people within organizations that actually perform some IT functions, basically based on need, even though they do have an access or access to IT within their organizations. Solutions sometimes don't come fast enough, sometimes there's not budget, but they still need access to technology and the ability to implement it quickly. But Bushel is also about the whole concept of MDM possibly being simple. We thought about this whole question: what if MDM was simple? We thought about it really long and hard. We asked ourselves questions like, what if it were centrally managed, easy to use, fast, didn't require IT assistance? Not that we wouldn't need IT assistance in the future, but for some quick, simple things, especially repetitive things, what if we could solve those problems for those users? Of course, there's the issue of compliance. So for any organization or work group, compliance is always important. Safety is always important. Security is always important. But in any case, we wanted to make sure that there was a safe environment for those users that would allow them the fastest possible route to using their technology. For us, that perfect world was the shortest distance between 2 points, connecting that user with the technology, or connecting the right person with the right tool. Casper connects the right person to the right tool. We were actually looking for the right tool for a different audience that Casper didn't address. That's when Bushel was thought up. Bushel is a whole new product built from the ground up, specifically for that new customer. Comfortable with technology, but has a primary job that's not IT. Needed simple functions like setting up email, things like that, but needed to be able to do it quickly, simply, and easily. So that whole panacea of MDM made easy, it's not an easy thing to do. That's why Bushel was made from the ground up. But what are the differences between Bushel and Casper? Well, it doesn't require a jump start. Doesn't require much training. Pretty intuitive. We don't have user accounts. We don't need VPP codes. No firewall key encryption, license tracking, packaging, imaging, scripts. Pretty simple stuff. We believe that the large number of people who would be using the Apple devices in our target group really don't need that kind of complexity. They're looking to solve simple problems, but they need a quick path to use the technology. And to give a little bit of a demo, to show you a little bit more about the technology, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Mike Devins.
Thanks, guys. So after that last slide, you're probably thinking, well, what does it do, right? But rest assured, you'll all have a stable career walking out of here. We haven't done anything to step on those toes, we hope. Hopefully, since yesterday's announcement, you've been able to make your way to bushel.com, learn more about the product, and this is sort of the landing page for all things Bushel, whether that's an existing customer logging into their Bushel, or if you're a new interested party signing up for Bushel in the top right corner. Bushel is free for 3 devices forever. And this is the approach we're taking. Not a limited feature set, not a limited amount of time, but free for 3 devices forever. After that 3rd device, if you want to add a 4th, a 10th, a 50th, $2 per device per month. Pretty straightforward, hopefully minimizing that barrier to entry in terms of costs. It's hosted, so minimizing the barrier to entry in terms of hardware. And from a technical perspective, hopefully minimizing some of the barriers to entry around intimidating products, because we've tried to create something that truly is simple to use. So right now, we are in a pilot, an invitation-only pilot, and we're doing this for a couple reasons. One, we want to make sure we've got the technology right. We also want to be able to scale appropriately, make sure our servers can keep up with what we hope to be great demand. And so we'll be doing our best to deliver those activation codes as quickly as we can. So keep an eye on your inbox if you've already requested one. We hope to get your Bushel going real soon. It sounded strange. Activation codes will not be required after pilot. This is how we're throttling over the next few months. When you go to sign up for your Bushel, you'll enter organization information, some idea of the number of devices you might need, and from here, the administrator will be creating their account. This is what you'll use to log in to change the settings on your Bushel anytime you might need to do that. This is the beginning of the sign-up process for every user, and this will remain pretty consistent even as we leave pilot. Once you've created that account, check your inbox. Now, the person checking their inbox is not necessarily an IT manager. This is a small business owner. This is an office manager, perhaps a marketing manager, right? We're looking at that different type of customer that might be going through this process. Once you receive that confirmation email, we'll invite you to sign in to complete the sign-up process. Now, what you see next, if you've done jump starts, you're familiar with pairing with Apple's Apple push notification service. This is perhaps the most technically involved, perhaps the most intimidating portion of setup, and we're working on some ways to walk those users through this in a really clean fashion. But this is also where all the magic happens, so arguably the most important part. of the process. This is where you can log in to Apple's push certificates portal, take the property list from our website, bushel.com, exchange that with Apple, establishing trust, giving access to deliver those push notifications, the thing that drives the entire MDM experience for those customers. Once you've got that linked up, you're able to download a certificate and hand it back over to Bushel, and you've successfully completed, as I said, hopefully not too intimidating a process, but the most technical part of the Bushel process. And from here, to complete setup, it prompts for Exchange or other industry standard email options to configure for those devices. In this case, we're using Exchange Auto Detect. It's not actually saving any of my information, simply using it to discover settings. We'll talk about some other options you have there as well. So what I'd like to do is show you a bit more of a product tour with some of the other capabilities of Bushel enabled, so you can get a feel for what this product is like using it on a regular basis. Again, hopefully it's not a common part of your job to be visiting Bushel. It's more of a workflow versus a job, but when you need to do that workflow, hopefully it's a simple way to do that. Diving in first to something like security settings. We've done a couple things here. One, we've tried to keep it slim. There are a number of things we could have enabled here, but we also wanted to help make some smart decisions on behalf of the users to get them started on the right foot. That's not to say they can't change these. These are all adjustable. But something like, by default, enforcing a passcode policy. If it's a company-owned device that you're deploying, perhaps you choose to disable iCloud, avoiding issues like activation lock on some of these devices. And though we don't describe it in such technical terms, corporate data, protecting corporate data, that's managed open in, and essentially allowing us to deliver company email and the associated documents, maybe through something like Box. But they're not saving those files elsewhere. So in the future, when we need to pull that back, we have a secure environment to pull that back from. And again, these can be adjusted at any time, universally for all the devices in our Bushel. In addition to security settings, we can, if we skipped it up front or want to make more changes to our Exchange or other email providers, we also have the ability, I'll just point this out, to enter those settings manually, if that's appropriate, with a couple other dialog options there as well. With regard to apps, we're doing managed VPP. So we're not distributing codes, we're doing managed VPP. You can see my apps are syncing from my VPP account, iOS and Mac. You can see apps I have in my library, apps I've deployed, and as I invite users here for pre-iOS 8 devices, looking at some ways to smooth that out with future software updates from Apple to minimize some of these steps. But again, the idea is that we can link these apps, free apps or paid apps, with a couple of benefits, especially to that small business owner, but really value at any level. And that's investing in the device is one thing, but investing in the apps that make the device relevant and powerful for your work is another. And how do we help those business owners reclaim that value instead of simply have it walk away when that user leaves the company? Being able to reclaim those codes when you unenroll the device is an important component of VPP, and we're looking at distributing books in a similar fashion as well. Each time you log in, your VPP account syncs up, so any changes you make are updated at that time. With regard to devices, there are a few different ways you can enroll. So the first is if I, as the administrator, am setting up a new device personally, or maybe for a new employee that's starting, I can sort of title that user and enter the email address, which will be configured from the settings I entered. Open enrollment, we'll talk more about. That's probably the most relevant way for most users. Securing it with a PIN, allowing anyone to access, either on a local network or broadly, the enrollment process in a really accessible way. And we're also building in integration for Apple's device enrollment program to be able to improve upon that out-of-box experience where you, as an end user, receive that iPad or that Mac in the mail. And when you open it up, it automatically registers through the activation process with your Bushel, and these capabilities are automatically deployed to the device. Open enrollment probably being what we've seen so far the most relevant user-accessible way to enroll devices. When we look at an individual device, I get some cursory overview here. I get status is awesome, that's good. I get additional details, and this is especially relevant when we look at the export options for something like Xero or QuickBooks for accounting. Status on apps that have been deployed, emails installed, security settings are installed, and the ability to action this device. And we've sort of bucketed this into three types of scenarios. Perhaps that user is locked out. I can remotely remove that passcode. But because the policy is still in place, the requiring of passcode, they'll immediately be prompted to create a new 4-digit PIN, for instance, on their iPad. In the event that a device is lost, we can lock that device. We can remove the corporate data. Again, anything we delivered, we can securely pull that back without touching user data, or we can wipe that device. And if the employee is leaving the company, no longer needed, we can unenroll, thereby removing data without wiping the device. Pretty standard, straightforward options. And a quick dashboard overview, just kind of a status, a quick glance. Have they checked in recently? The device is encrypted. Again, reporting on that encryption status. One other thing I'd like to point out, so support, live chat right here through the site. Those lovely gentlemen that we mentioned back at the office are actually manning our support tickets directly. And this is cool for a couple reasons. One, it minimizes that shortest distance between 2 points. If a user is having an issue with Bushel, we want them to speak directly to the person that can solve it. And that person will be able to solve it globally. Because it is a hosted solution, they'll be able to send us an email, send us a chat, and we can implement those fixes in a really, really quick fashion. Hopefully, minimal requirement for support, but hopefully a good solution to address it when it arises. So we've seen a bit about what the setup process looks like, and you've probably enrolled devices, but I just want to give you a glimpse at what it looks like for a customer who their company is using Bushel, and they're setting their iPad up for work. So let's go ahead and take a look at that process. Device comes out of the box, and open enrollment is enabled for my Bushel. So I'm going to demo.bushel.com, simple domain company.bushel.com, where I can give my device a name. I can either let it auto-populate my email or override that if necessary. And I can enter that secure PIN to make sure that I'm authorized to enroll in this Bushel. Pretty standard process from here, pushing that profile down to the device. Once that profile is on my iPad, we'll see some of the things that I've customized come to life on the device. So the first thing that we'll see is the apps that I've deployed to this iPad are installed. Now, everything's been in real time, but I'm going to save you 2 minutes, and I'm going to fast forward right there. Perfect. These are big apps. Wi-Fi here is terrible, so. And that passcode requirement. So we can make sure that the user sets a passcode on the device, enforcing that security. Again, something I can remove as needed. And we'll see that as I put the device to sleep and wake it back up, that passcode policy is now enforced. So we've talked a bit about who Bushel might be a right fit for. You can see some, hopefully, clear differences. Oh, we're zipping. Cool, I shouldn't talk with my hands when I'm doing that. Hopefully some clear differences between what you know as a highly capable, highly complex tool that you're well prepared to use in something like the Casper Suite, and how that's evolved even to this BYO environment with the BYOD option in Casper Suite, and this sort of consumerization of technology. And as Apple has continued to do that with their devices, people know them, love them. We want to meet more customers where they are, and that includes bringing some of these MDM capabilities to that small to medium-sized business customer, sort of that next generation of IT, and allowing it to be a task, allowing it to be a workflow, instead of needing a career position to own that process. Let's see if I can get back to the proper slide here so we can resume. So again, Bushel coming soon. If you've requested your invitation, stay tuned. If you haven't, head over to bushel.com. Again, learn more and stay tuned for more capabilities as we move through pilot to general availability very soon. I'm going to hand it back to Charles. Again, a simple product doesn't necessarily warrant a 60-minute, a tedious presentation, so we want to be respectful of that. But we also want to give you the opportunity to ask some questions with regard to Bushel, and hopefully what hasn't been made clear can be made clear through some astute questions from the audience. So bring him back up. Thanks,
So I thought I'd confuse everyone as much as possible by having Michael and Michael do the demos. So Michael Devins, Michael Bingham, thank you guys. So really, we've got like 38 minutes for questions. I don't think we had planned on having that long, but now that we do, great.
I know what you're going to ask. Go ahead.
Scale. How far does this scale?
That's a very interesting question. I have a blog post, because I write a lot of those, teed up to answer that specifically.
Do you want to restate the question quick? We didn't
Yeah.
have a mic.
To restate the question, how far does it scale? So I would say that that's not a technical limitation, it's a logistical limitation, like many things iTunes, MDM related. It scales as far as one group or one cohort of users that are going to get your settings scales. So one of the examples I use in one of the blog posts that we did for Bushel is you could use this in kindergarten. However, in first grade, they're going to have a different set of applications than they'll have in kindergarten. So you wouldn't want to use this for an entire K-12 or an entire district, but for a single kindergarten classroom, a single first grade classroom, even in an entire first grade, assuming everyone has the same apps. Go ahead.
So would it be fair to say it scales as long, sorry.
Would it be fair to say it scales as long as you have a completely homogeneous group?
Yes, homogeneous is a great word. It's actually one that I used in one of the blog posts about this. Yeah, everyone's going to get the same mail settings, the same security settings. So if you have that one person, like one of our beta testers was, they didn't want the CEO or the owner of the company to have all the same settings as everyone else. We're like, well, just don't enroll that device, I guess. But we don't have the ability and do not plan on the ability to group devices and to have users. And that's, if you look at the interface, it's super simple. There's not that much going on. And one of the reasons that we were able to keep it so simple is because we don't have a tab for users. We don't have a tab for groups. In every single screen, we don't have to account for how each user is going to encounter those. In the future, we do have a setting or an option for removing something from the administrative panel for whether it's a profile or an app for a given user or device. However, that's kind of an opt-out as opposed to actually scoping. So that whole scoping thing is probably one of the biggest things. And outside of the technical elements of packaging and things like that, really scoping is one of the bigger learning curves to Casper. How many people here have a CCA or any of the JAMF certifications at all? Someone asked us earlier, are we going to have a training program for Bushel? And I was like, if we need a training program for Bushel, I need to get fired. So, and maybe I need to get fired anyways. There's always that argument. But yes, Luis.
First of all, congratulations, Charles. It looks like a really interesting product.
Thanks. And thanks on behalf of all of us, by the way.
Yes, congratulations to all. I had a question. In the case of small business consultants who are helping their clients deploy this, is there sort of a multi-context admin type login that gives that consultant the ability to access multiple client subscriptions, if you will?
No. There may be at some point in the future. We are, I would say our future feature set is about as data-driven as you can get. So if people request things, then we'll obviously take that into account like any other product. One of our goals is definitely to keep it as simple as possible. That is an intriguing question to us more than a lot because for example, the ACN community can amplify a message, right? And B, because if you are in that technical element where you're managing a bunch of accounts, then we can assume that you are technical and adding a bunch of design elements to the interface won't really complicate things for you. So we do have an admin panel that only we have access to. And as we scale out and take customer feedback, then trying to decide what elements of that we'll end up giving out is definitely in our purview. We're also looking at doing something with referral codes and monetizing that relationship. So, yes, ma'am.
For companies that already have the Casper Suite in their system, would there be any advantages to running Bushel in tandem with Casper Suite, or am I not your right target audience?
So releasing at JNUC was a unique and trying to write the slides for how we were going to discuss it in those 5 minutes that we did was kind of a unique experience because the product isn't necessarily tailored to the people here. And I'll get to answering your question more directly in a minute. I'm not a politician, so I don't have to not do so. But you know, the people here are the trusted advisors to the people who we are tailoring the product to, if that makes sense. And this is also our family. You know, I've been to every JNUC. A lot of the people on the team have. So we really wanted to tell you guys about it first. But I would say overall, you know, it's not for as many of the people here as it could be. Having said that, in the future, will you be able to upgrade and or downgrade? So upgrade to the Casper Suite from Bushel and or downgrade to Bushel from the Casper Suite if that turns out to be too much for you. That is absolutely in the pipeline. It's not ready yet. Will there be some kind of integration where you can see your Bushel devices from within Casper? That's been discussed but not built. The production schedule for Casper is very aggressive, and there's a lot of way cooler features that they're working on than to kind of pander to us. But I do see that in the future at some point. Whether that's 6 months or a year from now is kind of hard to say, but I do hope that that'll be there soon. So.
You only have one MDM profile on the device. You can't have a machine device enrolled in both.
Yeah, so what Robert's saying is you can't have a device enrolled in both. However, what you can have is you can have Casper receiving your data from your Bushel account into your Casper dashboard or your JSS interface. So I would see that as how it would be interpreted. And I'm very open to you know, contact us or email us recommendations for how you might like to see that. As is Chase, our excellent UX designer upstairs there in the back. So,
can you talk through how it could potentially work in a kindergarten and first grade classroom?
yeah.
Different apps needed in different classrooms.
Yeah, so a common question to preface that is, will it work with Casper Focus? So this is not Casper, so no, it won't work with Focus. So trying to keep 5- and 6-year-olds, I have a 6-year-old, focused is always a challenge. But how it would work in a kindergarten scenario. You know, let's take DEP as an example. You get 30 iPads, you want to put them in the classroom. You pull your DEP certs into Bushel. You assign all the devices or scope all the devices to Bushel. In Bushel, you say, oh, this is Mary, this is Johnny, this is Billy. And then, you know, as the parents or the kids or the teacher opens the devices, then they automatically enroll for that student. They automatically get whatever VPP apps were put into that kindergarten's Bushel. Hypothetically, if you were to try to scale this into a full K-12, what you'd really end up doing is getting a kindergarten account, a first grade account, a second grade account, and then having a different pane of glass to manage each one. It's not the most appropriate use of the tool. It's kind of shoehorning. But in technology, we shoehorn things all the time. So I took that into account when I was writing up, like, oh, here's how we see people using Bushel. And so that's how I would see that going.
So you'd have like a totally separate Bushel account.
Entirely separate Bushel account, yeah. So if you're John Doe K-12, you know, John Doe ISD 212 or something, you would just make, you know, K1, 2, 3, 4 as a, you know, maybe you're using Google Apps like a lot of K-12, so you just do, you know, IT +1 at, you know, district.org or whatever. That's kind of how I would see this being interpreted in that context. It's not the appropriate fit for that context. Really, Casper is, because you want to be able to overlay Focus and a bunch of the other features in the future. But having said that, like if you're piloting in kindergarten, you know, it might be a great fit. Or if you're piloting in 4th grade, because I've never seen anyone actually pilot kindergarten, you know. But if you're piloting 1 grade and you've got 30 in a classroom or 1 cart, I can definitely see, you know, carts are very homogeneous. So I can easily see this being used in a cart type of environment if, for example, you didn't want to be using Configurator. We're not supervising devices, so we're not disabling, you know, features like Find My iPhone. So there's a bunch of things that Casper can do, especially when you get to that supervision point, that we're not going to do. We might do some of those things in the future. And we did have a slide up here for roadmap that I completely skipped. So, so I'll address that in a few minutes.
I just have one other quick question about
Oh, yeah.
the interface, like the visual interface. It's a tight, clean design. I like it.
I thank you on Chase's behalf.
It looks great. So I'm just wondering if that's something that might find its way into Casper. It's sharp. It's
I
very
cannot.
accurate.
Thank you on Chase's behalf, because that was really all him. Yeah, I know that that we now have a UX team being built around Casper. So, as far as tight, excellent interfaces, as tight as you can make it. You know, the problem with Casper and having written tools in the past, the problem with any tool is the more things it can do, the more complicated the UI is going to be, no matter what you do. So will they find ways to optimize that experience? I'm sure they will. Will it ever be able to be as tight as something that just has so much of a smaller scope? You know, that's a pipe dream, you know. Having said that, have you seen the DEP? Who's logged into a DEP portal? Now that's a tight interface, right? I mean, it's super simple and it's very complicated what it's doing on the back end, but they've just taken out all the options to do a bunch of different things and made it pretty simple, I think. I don't know, maybe other people disagree.
Hi. As far as Bushel's final release is concerned, is this going to be a cloud-only service, or are you going to be able to install it locally on your own
Bushel is
service?
absolutely cloud only. Yes, it's SaaS. It's currently hosted in North America. So, you know, while people in other countries might choose to use it, we have no way to block them. A lot of people in the EU have issues with having their data and services hosted in the US. Will we end up opening EU? That is absolutely in the plan. I will not put a date on product introduction or new things. That's more of a legal concern than a technical one, though.
So
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned the ability to lock and wipe, but how about actually locking down the iPad or devices to where first graders, kindergartens can't actually install any additional applications or can't actually change any of the preferences that you may want?
Yeah, adding more features. So if you look at Apple Configurator, you see a whole lot of checkboxes, right? Each one of those checkboxes would probably take us about 2 hours to add. So we've been trying to be extremely judicious as far as what we add to the tool. Once you add one manifest, it's very simple to cut, copy, paste that code to add multiple ones. What you run into there is everything we add makes it more complicated. So if we were to get 100 people asking us to add a button, we'd certainly add it. With a couple of exceptions. When it comes to locking things into a single app, going into single app mode, really that's a place where we see Casper as being the tool that you should be using. When it comes to locking down App Store, disabling the App Store, that's a very simple thing for us to add, but when you add that, there's so much business logic that goes into the impact of that. If I allow you to lock out the App Store, you can't push apps through me, so then I have to take into account this whole new process of, oh, well, let's enable the App Store when you're pushing apps and then disable it afterwards, and all kinds of weird things come into play. And so we have to add new buttons on more screens. So I would say that it's almost like we do an ecological impact assessment of the whole tool with each feature request and try to really decide what we want and what fits in our vision. And that's one of the challenges with talking to a group of IT, people in IT. And as one, you know, I think I must have bugged Zach 10 times a year to add new features to Casper for the past, 7 or 8 years, to the point where he probably didn't want to actually talk to me when we met about doing this tool. But will we? Maybe. I would say we'll see. It's data-driven decision-making in a way. So I don't want to roundabout kind of answer the question, but a lot of that, will we do something, is kind of TBD. So, yes, sir.
Is there going to be a
A Bushel Nation. If, we were talking about adding forums. Yep. Yeah, Brian up there wanted to do forums. And again, if we need forums, then we probably are making some bad UX decisions. So, hopefully not. We might add a space on JAMF Nation at some point. I could see that. But hopefully it would be more of a playground for people. We were toying around with the idea of gamification. Like, hey, I added some iPads to my Bushel, but no one really seemed into it but me. So I'm obsessed with badges. Like I'll do anything. I'll check in anywhere on Foursquare or something. I'll drive and go to a terrible restaurant all the way out in some random area just to get a badge. So I would add more devices to my Bushel for a badge.
Sorry if you've answered this already. How many devices do you currently have in your beta?
We're I think hovering around 100 right now. I think as far as scale goes, it's a substantial cluster that all this stuff's stored on. In our testing, we think that we could exceed easily 100,000 without adding any additional servers right now. And we actually have multi-cluster functionality. So we have one cluster right now, but adding a second cluster and then adding multiple servers behind the load balancers is pretty straightforward. Yes, sir?
How exactly does free and paid app management work if there's no user accounts for distribution?
We struggled with that for a long time. So the question, how does the VPP really work? So if you have an Apple ID and you sign up, and we give you an app and you attach that app to VPP, we track the hash of your Apple ID. So for each one of your devices, we only send you one code. So that's how we handle users. On the back end, we actually have users. We just don't expose it to the front end. So we know, oh, this user has these devices. So then the next logical question to that would be, how do I reclaim my codes when I unenroll? And the answer to that is, if a hash is unique, upon an enrollment, then revoke the codes from that hash. And that's how we reclaim the codes and then attach them to the next Apple ID in sequence. So that was a very complicated thing to figure out. To make a tool simple is extremely complicated because you run into a lot of business logic along the way. Yes, sir, Mr. Troughton.
So for the Mac management, this is agentless, right? So
this is MDM using the Mac, yeah.
Okay, so you don't need to install like the JAMF binary or anything like that?
Nope. Yeah,
okay.
We have no agent, no binary. It's all through the MDM commands.
Okay.
Which brings up one interesting thing. When you get your accounts, the MDM calls for how frequently you lock screensavers. Our available options are 1, 2, and 3 minutes. So we're not currently locking the screensaver of a Mac because if you were to lock my Mac every 3 minutes, I would really hate you. So we're trying to figure that out right now without making a binary. But. Don't you guys want to answer some questions?
You're doing such a great job is the thing.
I might have missed this as well, but did you say, like, so is there just one, like, would you designate, like, in a small business, so let's say you've got 7 people, and you've got, like, I think you picked out one of, like, the marketing people.
Right.
So you're just giving one person that office kind of, like, admin login to the site, and then everybody else that can join, so, like, let's say, user 7 has just an iPhone, they can't log into the website and play around with the other settings.
Correct, and that's why we built DEP and open enrollment. So open enrollment, it's a PIN code. You say, and then if you have X number of incorrect logins, and we're not going to really disclose that right now, then we'll go ahead and shut it down and make you change your PIN code. Okay. So that's how we got around having to have user accounts, if that makes sense. it's incredible how much logic there. Oh, well, if we don't have users, how do we get devices in? You know, do we SMS them a private link? And that was kind of, you know, that doesn't work for OS 10 or iPads that aren't, you know, that don't have accounts, and we can't assume that they have Apple IDs and all kinds of fun stuff. It's cool building tools, by the way. It's like the most fun I've had in a long, long time. It's like base jumping.
I think the biggest challenge you're going to have is, just like Apple does in some of their more recent videos, 1,000 no's for every yes, because you're going to have people like us in this room asking you for X.
And that's the challenge with releasing a product like this at JNUC. You know, a lot of very competent technical people, and a product that was built for you to win your weekends back by just saying, oh, here, cousin or you know, coworker, here's something that you can use rather than bugging me. You know, one of the things that I used to see a lot, you know, having my own consultancy, was a lot of our customers were the marketing group within some really big company, and the big company couldn't move quick enough. And the reason was because, you know, there's just so much going on. So we have an option to export all of the device states. So, for example, if you need HIPAA compliance, are the devices encrypted? There's one button. You can just go export your settings once a month, once a week, whatever your IT department might require if you're that marketing group, and you can prove that you're in compliance. Now, you might have a Dropbox account and be, you know, sharing data out, so managed open-in, you know, that's also reported. So one of our goals was to kind of eliminate that, enable people not to have to bring in third parties to do shadow IT type of consulting. Not that I want to put anyone out of business in the room, but most of us really didn't want to do that, because then you're getting sucked into these like incredibly politically charged environments that you don't want to be in the first place. It's hard to bill when you're in a meeting for 4 hours just to justify half an hour billing, you know. I'm speaking to you specifically because you're still consulting.
So again, having said the you know, you got to say no a lot of times. The one thing that I think is missing, and maybe this is in your plans, is Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So product roadmap. So we are currently planning on 3 additional payloads, and that's it. So web clips, because web clips are cool. They're not as easy to do as I thought they'd be via MDM, but they're cool. Wi-Fi. And not Wi-Fi, no 802.1x, because we don't want to store certs. We don't, if you noticed, you never entered a password except for the password to log into your tenant. So we don't have any data, really. We know your mail settings, but anyone who knows your domain and knows auto-discover knows your mail settings, right? So we don't have any data, right? And that makes our job a lot easier for a lot of different reasons. And then VPN is the third payload. So if you're in a small, medium business and you need to issue the VPN, the Wi-Fi. With DEP, the funny thing with DEP is, and in any enrollment, you already have the Wi-Fi password if you're enrolled, right?
Maybe. Where you're doing it at home.
But
I'm standing at the Apple Store having bought a computer because mine was stolen.
yeah. So.
And I now need to change the password on a Wi-Fi password.
Yep.
So I'm not using 802.1x for all the other devices.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's why we started building it. It's actually in the back-end code. We just haven't fully tested it, so it's not ready to make it to the GUI, but it's there, and it will be there in the GUI eventually. Again, when do we, to quote Woody from the other day, when do we actually send it out? When it's ready, Hopefully ASAP, but it takes time to test this stuff. Yes, sir. You live out in Stillwater?
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I work out there. Anyway.
Oh.
So how exactly do you tie a Bushel account to your DEP? Is it during that introductory process, and then will it show up as a server option on the dropdown?
Not having good Wi-Fi, makes it a little challenging. In the devices screen, there's a DEP screen, and then you just upload your DEP token. It's like, we have 3 little bitty buttons, one to export our cert. Oh.
In a minute. Back one more.
Oh. anyways, it's in the GUI. It's on the device's screen. It's the far right button. You hit that configure, you see 3 boxes. One exports, one directs you to Apple's DEP portal, and the third box imports. And it's just that. It takes me about 2 seconds when I do it, or 2 minutes maybe. The hardest thing with DEP is all the devices need to have been purchased under an Apple PO that's attached to the DEP account. The idea of...
If you look quick, don't miss it, don't blink, but yeah, this is where it would be.
Oh, yeah, 3 boxes. So we tried to make it easy and pretty visually appealing in terms of the GUI. And we tried to match as much as possible the actual graphical interface of DEP, because it's a really nice interface, I think. Yes, sir.
To play
Ma'am.
devil's advocate, what if you have a really small organization like a family church or something like that? They're not interested in DEP or VPP. How useful is this to them?
I would say this is useful if you want to lock a bunch of devices, enforce passcodes. If you wanted to, once we get the Wi-Fi and VPN stuff integrated, if you wanted to do that, and if you wanted to report on the state of devices. If you're not using VPP and DEP, one of the questions that we've gotten a lot is, can we use this at home? We have no way of eliminating the use of this at home, although we're not specifically tailoring this from a marketing message to home and family users. But what is the value proposition if you're not using VPP and DEP? And that's on a case by case. Like, I don't know what values certain people have, but we can export the security settings and list them. And if giving people security settings and email automatically and then listing what they have is of value to the price point that we have, then great. And if it's not, then it's not,
One thing we've learned too from some of our beta customers and early conversations with Apple is there are people that are extremely interested in the inventory functionality of this, being able to export for fixed asset depreciation or annual refresh. And so not that we were surprised by that, but there's been positive response purely to the inventory functionality. So values may vary by organization, but there is a limited set of features there still, even without those 2 programs.
Yeah.
Will there be a functionality to distribute apps without VPP?
Free apps, yes. And you could hypothetically distribute a non-free app. They'd just be prompted to purchase it. But the challenge with distributing free apps is if you distribute a free app without using the VPP portal to do it, then you end up not using managed open-end. So yes, we can distribute a free app without attaching a VPP token to the account, but it will not actually do managed open-end. And if managed open-end is not of a concern, then no harm, no foul.
So have you guys considered this for managing, say, like a retail store's point-of-sale kiosks?
Yeah. I wrote a whole article on kiosks. I even put a little picture of the kiosk that covers up the home button because we don't do supervision and therefore we don't do single app mode.
Nice. I'm looking forward to reading that.
Is there anywhere for location data for where the iPad lives in the building?
I think location data is almost always creepy, except for schools where you're using something like iBeacons to track that. So I think the JSS team has done a great job of trying to figure out ways to make that not creepy. We could have done what Meraki does and show you like where the device is physically on a GPS coordinate, but there are some really bizarre legal hurdles in doing that.
Yes,
More like iBeacon type stuff. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, we're not even thinking about that in the future, to be honest. With the retail use, that does spark that for FIPS compliance and things of that nature. Tracking kids in schools, obviously iBeacons and things like that are in the plans for that. But as far as Bushel goes, it's, I've never met anyone in a small business who actually cared about that who wasn't a complete psycho. So, and granted, we have no way of filtering out complete psychos. We thought about having a portal, some kind of like, you have to answer these questions. We also thought about putting a breathalyzer on like, oh, I want to wipe that device. Oh, please blow in the thing, you know. But never got around to that. So.
It doesn't seem like when you say you have an iPad that has apps on it that someone had already, and then they join an organization and you want to enroll them into Bushel, it doesn't seem like that needs to be wiped or anything. You just go to, because as far as I understand, like with DEP, you have to wipe an iPad to then that whole thing.
Yes.
It seems like you get around that.
Although with OS 10, you can just RM Apple setup done, and upon the new account creation, it'll go ahead and DEP the OS 10 box. But yeah, the iPads, you have to do it on activation. So, yes, sir. You're not going to correct me, are you? You're good at that, though.
So looking at this and you know, as simple as you try to keep this the user interface, you know, talking about your previous your breathalyzer idea.
I still think it's a good one.
Are you doing anything or looking at putting anything in the product to explain and simplify the, you know, here's what you need to be aware of from a legal standpoint, or here's what you can and can't do from a privacy standpoint? Because I find that the audience that this is targeting, I think there's a very valid use for this, but do they understand some of those security and privacy and legality reasons behind, or that go along with the tools that you're equipping them with?
That's an interesting question. So one of the things that we built that isn't in the shipping product today that will be in the future is tooltips. So when you hover over something, we tell you kind of what it is, just trying to continue to simplify that experience. We pulled it out because it got annoying. You know, like how long do you present them? How do you present them? And it was a lot of text to write, you know. Hypothetically, we could link those to a blog post about that feature that kind of goes into more detail about that kind of thing. You know, with the payloads that we're sending out, there's not a lot of legal connotation to them. Like, so it's interesting perspective-wise, but I'll think about that. We'll think about that. It's not all about me.
You guys mentioned price?
Yes. Currently, it's first three free forever, and then for each additional device, $2 a month per device. So priced pretty much about the same as Casper in a lot of regards, so, according to scale of environment stuff.
So you mentioned there's no concept of users on the front end for the subscriber. So when a new person, an employee of a company is enrolling their device, it's simply by domain association that Bushel knows, or I guess they're visiting the subdomain, but they're not being asked for a password to enroll. It's just downloading the profile and automatically associating. Oh, the PIN. That's right.
Yeah. And then when the payload, like when the mail payload gets installed on the device, you'll be asked for your mail password or your POP or Exchange or what have you. But yeah, the PIN is the security code. And then after X number of incorrect PINs, it locks, makes the tenant or the administrator change the PIN. So, you know, will there be monkey box support? Possibly in the future. I restated the question before you asked it. It's a skill. Any other questions?
Making him run.
Who is that back there?
What about apps that, like Firefox or Google Chrome that are not in the App Store? Should we just let the user be a local admin and have them take care of it the old-fashioned way?
Yeah, this is MDM only. So I met with Ben Greiner from Robot Cloud the other day, and we went through like, what are the differences between and things like that. And I think we thought that maybe there might be more overlap between the two tools, but there's no overlap because we are doing pure MDM. So if you need to deploy tools that are not in the VPP, then, and to be clear, we're not doing self-developed apps, in-house apps. We're only doing App Store apps.
So the the model here is kind of similar to Puppet, where Puppet will handle your configuration management, and it really doesn't handle software management, doesn't do anything else. you'll need to get another tool. So,
Yeah.
for example, a lot of shops
Well,
that have Puppet
and-
and Manage Max also.
Yeah,
do
in a Puppet analogy, it's like we have some custom facts to tell you like how much disk space you have, what OS you're running, and the tenant administrator can look at that data, but they're not going to be able to update the device. They're not going to be able to issue a software update -all. They're not going to be able to do all those things. So I could see a correlation between Puppet. In fact, I was out late last night with a guy from Puppet. but we're not doing large-scale orchestration of every granular element of the system. Only the things that the MDM API gives us access to. So, awesome.
I think one more. Maybe we'll do the last question up at the top here.
Fiend.
Say you have a teacher that creates one of these accounts and then decides to leave, and a new teacher comes in and she created that account with her email address. Is it possible to change that to the new teacher for
Yes.
login?
Yes. I have not written up the exact process for that, but that will look something along the lines of, did anyone ever reset a network solutions password back in the, it'll be similar to how they do things. Anytime I run into trying to figure out a complicated question, I think what did someone else do to do pretty much that same thing intelligently, and I try to do that. So it'll probably involve sending a copy of your ID on letterhead, et cetera. So we're not going to make it automated as much as we'd like to, but that's a hard one because certificates get attached to things and things of that nature. So. All right, well, thank you guys so much for sticking around. I guess I look forward to seeing you all in Bushel and issuing out your codes as soon as we get around to getting back to the office. So, thanks, y'all.